I wanted to welcome you all to this panel this afternoon, or as for some, good evening. I myself am currently in Iceland and it's 1 a.m. and very dark. We're excited you could join us to delve into the diverse field of climate action and the many career pathways that are available. I'm Saga Helgason and I'll be moderating this panel. I graduated in Stanford in 2022 with a master's in Russian and Eastern European studies, with a focus on the shifting geopolitics in the Arctic as a result of climate change. Today, I sit on the steering committee of Stanford Alumni for Climate Action and oversee the newsletter for Stanford Alumni in Sustainability. This event is hosted by Stanford Alumni for Climate Action, or SACA for short. SACA is a non-partisan group of Stanford alumni deeply concerned about the devastating effects of climate change. Our purpose is to educate ourselves and inspire the wider community at Stanford to join us in taking action, whether it be small and large, individual and collective, to address this existential challenge to life on Earth. We have some exciting events coming up, so please stay tuned for those. We'll be posting some relevant links in the chat. On that note, our goal for today is for you to leave this panel with a sense of inspiration and optimism about the exciting and important topic of climate action. I would also love for you to leave with 2 to 3 pieces of insight you perhaps did not know before, with some takeaways that you can maybe immediately implement in your own lives. We'll spend about 35 to 40 minutes on topics covering career pathways, whether planned or unexpected, industry trends, challenges, opportunities, along with individual actions, and ending with getting our panelists' outlook on the future. Now, some housekeeping. Please submit your questions through the Q&A function, as we will be leaving 15 minutes for questions at the end. And now I'm thrilled to introduce our panelists, all graduated from Stanford in the last 8 years. First, we have Aarya, who graduated with her master's degree from Stanford in electrical engineering in 2023, and is now building Azuryne. I got that right. A fashion technology startup that leverages AI for helping to organize your closet. Azuryne.
Azuryne.
Azuryne, there we go. She's also director of community at Climate Cardinals, a nonprofit focused on mobilizing youth for climate action. Then we have Michael, a co-term, graduating in 2016 with a BS and MS in civil and environmental engineering, with a concentration in atmosphere and energy. Today, Michael is a lead product manager at Next Era Mobility, where he works to accelerate the decarbonization of America's fleets. Last but not least, we have Michaela, also a co-term, who graduated in 2022, having studied science, technology, and society, and a master's in sustainability science and practice. Michaela is now an investor at the Wesley Group, an early-stage VC firm investing across the energy, mobility, Industry 4.0, and workforce development sectors. But I'll leave the intros brief for now, as I know it's always better to hear from you directly. And I'm really excited to delve into learning more about your experience and path to climate action. Let's begin with each of you giving a brief introduction of what you're currently working on. Aarya, let's start with you. How did Azuryne come to be? Where are you at now with the startup?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, Saga. I would love to talk about, Azuryne, and it is a really unexpected thing that happened after graduation. So actually, I would say the quarter before, or 2 quarters before we graduated, I received an email from a couple of students in the GSB who were trying to do interviews for classes like Lean Launchpad and things like that. And they wanted to come up with an idea that was intersecting fashion and technology. And at that time, they were looking for some ML engineers, and I happened to be taking those classes at the time, and I love fashion. So I joined on to a group of people who were trying to find some solutions to the different problems in like the fashion tech space. And we ended up taking the class Startup Garage. I brought on one of my friends who was the real ML expert, and then him and I ended up becoming the people who made it through the class, wanting to co-found Azuryne, which is a wardrobe digitization app. I would say the core of what we do is really it's really about sustainability. I think that wardrobe visibility is lacking with a lot of people. We have this problem where consumers are buying a lot of clothes, and fashion companies are creating a lot of clothes, but we often still feel like we don't know what to wear. And at the same time, we're still buying a lot at the same time. So there's a really vicious cycle of hyper consumption and also overproduction. And there's a mismatched optimization problem in the heart of that and in the heart of the fashion industry. And fashion is also the world's second largest polluter after oil and gas. And I think that until recent years, it's something that wasn't really looked on. And I think a lot of it can start with the consumer. And so having access to more visibility of what we own, and with the whole AI boom, using AI to help leverage that is something that we're focusing on. So yeah, that's Azuryne.
Thank you so much for sharing. What about you, Michael? What are you working on at NextEra?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So I am a lead product manager at NextEra Mobility, which is a business unit within the larger NextEra Energy business, which is the world's largest producer of clean energy solutions. They also own a utility in Florida as well. But my business unit in particular is focused on the decarbonization of America's fleets. So that is heavy duty trucking, typically class 4 through 8. So the semi trucks you see on the road, those big box vans that make a whole lot of noise and spew a whole lot of pollutants into the air. Those are the things we're looking to electrify. I focus mainly on our early stage electrification efforts. So that's helping customers understand, how do I do this thing? Fundamentally, this is a really hard transition for a lot of businesses. Like, they see these vehicles as tools. They don't really care that their truck is gas or diesel or LNG or electric. They just want to move goods from one place to another or deliver services. So it's really an interesting challenge in that early stage of education about how this is better for you, for the environment, for your drivers, for your economics, and just really making that case very clear for our customers. So with that, we have a suite of software tools that we use. We have a set of consultants, and I work across all of those to really deliver value to our customers.
I love it, and it really is such a an industry and sector that you don't think about as much, I think, in our day-to-day lives, and especially me being from Iceland and having very remote towns. You're completely reliant on those heavy industry, those trucks being able to get goods and services, goods and exported goods back and from. What about you, Michaela? What's new at the Wesley Group? Congratulations on your promotion. You're now a senior analyst.
Thanks, Saga, and super excited to be here. Also, I think something interesting. So at the Wesley Group, we work with companies like Michael's at NextEra, and then we also invest in companies like Aarya's in the startup space. So kind of bridging corporate and startup worlds. Like you mentioned, I'm a senior analyst at the firm. I've been here for about a year and a half now, investing across all different sectors within climate. So energy, mobility, manufacturing, Industry 4.0 materials, kind of any industry that's currently responsible for emissions. And I think something kind of interesting about the role is that we invest across software and hardware. And it's interesting because software is kind of what you think of as traditionally a venture scalable industry, whereas hardware is what's actually going to suck the emissions out of the air and make a big dent in climate change. So I think what we're trying to do is kind of bridge both those fields. And we work with a lot of startups. We invest across a lot of different areas. And then we also have a lot of large corporate partners in our fund as well. So for example, Audi, like the car company, Alaska Airlines, a lot of energy companies invest in us. just to get greater exposure into the startup ecosystem and hear more about how they can innovate and really make a dent in solving climate change. So super excited to hear more from everyone and excited to be here.
I love it. It seems like I did a good job of picking my panelists, since Michaela is the bridge to all of you. I'm really wanting to delve deeper, maybe into sort of the beginnings of becoming interested in climate action, and sort of where that took hold and that passion. Why don't we start with you again, Aarya? What led you to pursue a career in climate sustainability, fashion, AI?
I would say my inspiration really came from one of my friends. That's why I think it's really important to just talk about it. I remember hanging out with a friend, and I think she was talking about illegal dolphin poaching, and how much that had affected her. And I think just through more conversations with her, I started to realize like how much she cared, and how someone who was like me in my circle really cared about something like that. And I think when you're, especially even when you're younger, but you are talking about like world events and current events and talking about things that you're passionate about to your friends, that is a huge impact on them. And ever since then, she was like the same friend that we'd be on the beach and she'd see like a plastic cup lying on the sand, and she'd be the only one to like walk it all the way back to the parking lot and find a trash can and throw it in there. So I would say it's that action and that example, and just looking up to her, that made me see how big of an issue it was. And I think it all comes down to education. I'm also the director of community at Climate Cardinals, which is the world's largest youth nonprofit, and it's all about education. It's just about talking about it. And the founder of our nonprofit always says the most important thing you can do for climate change is just talk about it. And I really do think if my friend wasn't so inspired herself, it wouldn't have rippled its way to me. And so yeah, my friends, long story short.
Definitely the importance of friendship comes into climate change too. What about you, Michael? What got you into climate?
Yeah, I would say I came from a slightly different angle. I came from liking things that are really big and complicated. I've always been like a loving infrastructure. It's just bridges and transmission lines, and anything that's big and kind of just always in the background has always just really interested me. And growing up, I grew up in a small town. It's like rural Illinois, and there's a nuclear power plant one town over, and I always saw it and I was like, that thing is cool. I don't know what it does. I thought it made clouds for the longest time, but it's like that thing is really awesome just because of how big it is. And I didn't realize that that's the backbone of our modern economy, and how important it is to everyone, until I really got to Stanford. I took understanding energy. It's like I don't remember the class number, but with Jane Woodward and Carl Knapp were teaching the class at the time, and that really just opened my eyes to how incredibly cool, interesting, important, just really fundamental the energy industry is. And then from there just was like, obviously coming at it with wanting to make the world a better place. And so renewables and that sort of clean tech angle was always just really important to me. And I never really wanted to do anything else. I've always wanted to be in the clean tech space since taking that class.
Yeah, that's definitely not something that I'm not coming from the engineering background, but that's definitely really interesting to hear how, there are so many different ways to becoming involved. And I know that Michaela, obviously coming from the venture side, I'm curious sort of whether it's a chicken and egg type of thing, but you worked in venture capital before joining the Wesley Group. Did venture find you, or did you find venture, and maybe more on your path to climate?
Yeah, it's a great question. And coming into Stanford, I really had no idea what venture capital was. I'd seen a few episodes of Shark Tank, and it turns out that's not what my day-to-day is like at all, which was, a little disappointing. But I came into Stanford not really knowing what I wanted to study. I knew I was really interested in tech, and I knew that I wanted to be involved in tech in a way that was making a positive impact on the world. And I actually went on a service trip, a volunteer trip abroad to South Africa, and I'd grown up in the Bay Area, where it's a very climate forward environment, and there's a big emphasis on whether it's sustainable packaging and recycling and different climate initiatives. And in South Africa, I saw that communities wanted to have those same kind of sustainability initiatives, but there wasn't the same infrastructure in place. And Michael, you talked about the importance of having that infrastructure and realizing that communities had their own solutions, but just didn't have like the capital to make it happen. And it really got me interested in sustainability kind of more broadly. And during my time at Stanford, I also participated in a fellowship program called the Mayfield Fellows Program, which was my first kind of peek into the world of venture and startups. And basically, the fellowship has you do an internship with a startup over the summer, and also pairs you with a VC mentor who gives you an introduction into kind of the VC side of things. And I thought going and working in venture would be a great way to kind of pair my interest with like early stage technology with wanting to have that kind of climate impact as well.
I love it. All the different pathways. What about maybe some unexpected career paths? What do you say, Aarya? Did you intend to go this way? Because I know that you have your background in biomedical, you've done medical devices before and English. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think that I had studied so many different things. I did biomedical engineering and English lit at Arizona State before, and then I did electrical engineering at Stanford. And I don't even think either of those really had a straight line for me. But I would say things started piling up. I think when I was really young, I always used to look at Vogue and just get really excited when I would see fashion. And I would love it when Fashion Week was happening, things like that. And I never knew that like the dots would connect. And then as I was at Stanford, I was like looking for these unique opportunities, and a possibility of this startup just came to me. And at the same time, I was like deep in the AI space too with my degree. And now everything mismatch that I do really works out, because being a founder, some days I'm like writing articles that could be published that are stories on what we're doing, or some days I'm doing marketing or things like that. And there's so much like it's such an interdisciplinary nature that comes with being a founder. So I think the zigzag of my career so far and it not making sense, it finally did happen to make sense. So yeah, I think it was just also a reminder to myself to just do what I thought is interesting without trying to connect the dots, because they will eventually connect.
Absolutely. It's everything's always better in 2020 hindsight. And I feel like even now we might have connections that we won't realize will come back, and it'll all make sense. I know that Michael, you had something to add to this too about sort of unexpected career pathways.
Yeah, I find it interesting. I have quite a bit of overlap to that circular path or winding path to get to where I'm at. I came out of school knowing I wanted to do energy. Like that has always been very clear to me. But the like, what do I want to do in that space has always kind of baffled me a little bit. It didn't matter what I was doing. I just wanted to be doing something. So I started off doing consulting, and kind of got a little tired of that, and an opportunity presented itself to learn software engineering on the job. And going to Stanford, you're exposed to software engineering all the time. Everyone's taken all the CS classes, but I never took one. I was always so scared of it because it's like, oh, it's CS, it's so hard. Like, only the smart people are taking those classes. I don't think I can do it. And then I got to learn on the job, and I ended up really falling in love with it. And realizing that it's just solving problems, and being able to take my engineer mindset to that and just writing code. So that was definitely something I would have never expected myself to be doing, writing code and being a software engineer. And then 2 years after that, pivoting into product management, which was just an excellent blend of the technical from the software engineering and the like people and the strategic thinking from the consulting coming all together to really give me the skills to be successful as a product manager. So again, it's that winding path, and you come out with one plan of I'm definitely going to do this, and then life throws you a couple of curveballs.
Definitely. What's that? Isn't there a sort of a beginner, the CS 101 that everyone knows the name of the program? It's a woman or something.
Oh, Carol. Yeah.
Yeah. I heard that. Yeah, because I didn't do the.
Carol,
That's funny. Just shifting gears a little bit, and before we dive more heavily into the industry questions, Michael, I'm curious to know a little bit about what your opinion is on really the most serious climate problem that we're facing today, and how we can address that.
Yeah, I can only speak to the energy and maybe the electrification or the transportation side of it. But for me, I see it as scale, right? Like we have solutions that work currently. The biggest that solve a good portion of it. Doesn't solve all the problems. There are still many others: supply chain, raw materials. There's other issues there. But the fundamental thing of CO2 going in the atmosphere, for me, we have a lot of solutions that work today. And it's all about moving from small or pilots to big and doing it 100%. There's tons of, Michaela in the venture space can talk about all these amazing startups, pitching ideas and building pilots, but really it needs to go from pilot to scale. It's easier said than done. And that's why I think it's such a serious problem and a challenge, but it really is something we need to have done yesterday, move to 100% clean energy, 100% either EVs or green hydrogen vehicles. And we just need to go faster, and we need to go bigger. So to me, that's, obviously I have a very narrow view of the whole sustainability climate space, but for those that I understand, it's that scaling that I see as the biggest problem.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, and we'll touch on the scale problem a little bit later on too. What about you, Aarya? Where are you at with the most pressing problems?
I would definitely second Michael with his answer on how a lot of technology is there, but I think it's about bringing it right to the face of consumers, and also making it cheap for them. So my side is fashion and fashion pollution, hyper consumption and overproduction. For example, fashion brands, they don't have a lot of access onto what their consumer base is actually wearing and what they're actually purchasing, but also wearing until the end of that garment's life cycle. And we up until very recently, we couldn't even track the life cycle of a garment and things like that. And I think with this technology, especially like I said, the whole AI boom, I think all those are becoming possible, and consumers are able to get so much more information on like the visibility of their wardrobes and the garments that they're buying and their wear. And fashion brands are also able to see the results of how their clothes are being utilized and worn, and what's being bought. So I think that can help a lot with proper and like optimized production and usage. And so I think that probably goes for a lot of different sectors of what's actually being used and what's actually being properly utilized. And I think it's founders like us who are trying to get the technology at a good price to consumers to make it all as easy as possible for them. Absolutely.
And very interlinked with that scalability aspect is getting the right funding. So I'd love to hear from Michaela, what's your take on what are the biggest challenges that are facing your industry at the moment, the VC world, and funding as a whole?
Totally. Yeah. And I agree with all the points that have already been made. I think scale is a huge challenge, and us already having tech is definitely very clear. One kind of example that comes to mind is carbon removal and direct air capture, where we have tech that's working. It's just how can we get it on a scale where you can actually make a sizable dent in removing emissions from the atmosphere. And I think a lot of that does require pretty significant capital investment, and it's kind of incentivizing whether it's venture capital funds or governments to continue to put the millions and millions of dollars required into those initiatives, and understanding that there absolutely is the financial return aspect that will come. It may just take a longer scale than the typical software startup, which might give you a return in 6 to 8 years. Like maybe direct air capture will take 15 to 20, but at the same time, it's going to get us way closer to those climate goals. So I absolutely think urgency and scale are probably the two biggest challenges, and at least within our industry, incentivizing firms to maybe look at a slightly longer timeline, but understanding the rewards that they'll be able to kind of reap from making that decision too.
Yeah, definitely. What about are there any innovations that you're most excited to see coming up on the market? Aarya, what are your takes on this?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this. This is something that my startup Azuryne is currently solving. Just to go a little bit more into the problem, the problem we're solving is having full wardrobe visibility so that you can make more efficient choices with your wardrobe, with the garments that you buy and how you style them. Currently, a lot of these apps exist where you have a digital version of your closet onto your phone, and you can use AI to style and make shopping suggestions and things like that. And a lot of people might be familiar with Cher's wardrobe from Clueless. That whole thing kind of blew up, where everyone thought that was a really cool idea to just have something that like gives you outfits magically every single day. And a lot of people have tried to make that work. The only problem with that is on the consumer side, where the actual effort of uploading your clothes into your phone is really difficult, because the average woman has over 100 items in her wardrobe. She doesn't want to spend a day taking pictures of every single item and manually uploading it and entering all this information about it. So with AI, we can now detect clothes just from you in any position, whether you're with your friends or whether you're dancing. We can detect like the garment type and the garment color, and then now import it in your wardrobe. And that makes it so much easier and faster for the consumer to have that digital wardrobe on their phone and then make intelligent styling purchases and styling choices and things like that, sharing with friends. And I think that just enables a whole kind of a circular economy when it comes to fashion, and it can make sharing with your friends so much easier, or it can help you track all the garments that you're wearing, so now you know which ones you're wearing the most, which ones you're not wearing. Hey, maybe you don't have to buy that again, or hey, you don't have to buy this black dress because you already have 4 of them in your closet, and things like that. And so I think that's kind of where it goes back to, like the friend I was talking about, it goes back to your personal choices a lot, and fashion and just your personal consumption choices can make a really big impact. And so that's what we're trying to help with the consumer. So that's innovation I'm really excited about, because we're the first to be doing it in that way with AI. So
I know it's super exciting, especially I feel like we all have those like 5 things that we always grab that are in our closet,
Yeah.
and and then you forget that you had this one thing from a few years ago. And so I think it's a very cool problem that you're hoping to solve. And yeah, I know that you're offering to like digitize people's closets based on their Instagram feed, isn't that right?
Yeah, based on their camera roll, we can start doing it for them. So yeah,
that's super. Maybe Michael, what are your maybe your takes on another innovation that you're excited about, or opportunities?
Yeah, I think that, to Aarya's point, like AI, there's so much cool stuff going on in that space, and I think that there's just so many really smart people out there. I think I tend to focus a little bit more on the I don't know if you call it boring stuff, but like stuff we've done for a very long time, but just applying to different industries or different applications and use cases. So I'm really excited about how do we pair on-site generation, solar, battery storage, other assets with EV charging, and how do we balance that to optimize not only our customers' operations, right? They need the truck to work when they want to use it, right? But also to lower their carbon emissions. So some of the stuff around time of use matching on, lower carbon energy sources, some of the stuff Google's doing on their 24/7, 365 clean energy commitments, and Microsoft's also leading that stuff. I'm sure there's tons of AI underpinning that, but for me, that is something, that people have been doing on the utility scale side and some of the more industrial side for a while. And now we're just bringing that same technology to electric vehicles and really just trying to drive down emissions as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, what's sort of the current range miles wise for the heavy industry?
Yeah, it varies significantly, make and model, vehicle type. Some of the semis, the big Class 8 vehicles can get 200, 250. There's really exciting Gen 3 vehicles coming out on the market. If you get excited about heavy duty trucking, like I do, there's really exciting new models coming out that could be in the 350 range, and pulling a fully loaded trailer behind it. So once you get in the smaller vehicles, they tend to be a little bit closer to like the sedan range that you'll see. So in that 200-300 mile range. So definitely enough to meet 80%, if not 90 to 95% of the use cases that people are going to be using them for.
Yeah, I think that's so exciting, regarding the application of AI, especially when it comes to both the consumer side and, heavy industry and the like. And obviously this is, heavily tied to, the regulatory landscape and different policies that are put in place. So I'm curious to know and delve a little bit deeper into which policies are affecting your company the most, either in a good or a bad way. Why don't we hear from Michaela? What are you seeing in the startup world?
Yeah, so the IRA has affected kind of our investment thesis quite heavily, because I think something interesting about climate is so much of it can be kind of dependent on what new policies come out, like administration, things like that. With the IRA, I think maybe one policy that I've been looking into recently is the domestic manufacturing clause within the IRA, which basically allows EVs that have the majority of their parts in their supply chain within the US to get a significant kind of tax credit for each EV they sell. And with that, there are just so many kind of second degree innovations and impacts that come with it. So, for example, with that new legislation, there are going to be a ton of jobs coming into the US for domestic manufacturing. So one market that we recently researched as a firm is the learning and upskilling space, where it's projected that over the next decade, we'll have a shortage of around 1 million electricians, tons of welding shortages, different jobs in manufacturing. And we're thinking about how can we upskill the existing workforce to kind of make up for that gap. So I think with the IRA, there's so many kind of first degree implications where, you're going to sell more EVs, like supply chains are going to change, supply chain traceability, but then also there are second degree impacts and third degree. So really excited that was approved, and yeah, definitely very, very impactful for our industry.
Absolutely. It's never been a better time to be an electrician, right?
Totally.
Why don't we jump to Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I see, so thinking about it from a personal aspect, right? Like the IRA, great, right? It's all over the news. Everyone's talking about it. Well, they were talking about it, maybe not so much anymore outside of climate tech circles, but it just brought a lot of attention and showed, like we need to do something, and we are doing something. So like, I loved it just because people were talking about it and the impacts that climate change has had on them. And I thought it started a really great dialogue in the broader, US population, at least. From a business perspective, I would say that we always treat policy a little skeptically, right? Because policy can change, incentives can change. So all of our bets are usually made irrespective of policy, right? So we love the IRA because it's more money and it makes our investment thesis into, where we're focusing our time and energy much better. But we were going to do this regardless if the IRA money came or not. It's just like kind of gravy on top and just makes it that much easier to convince a customer because the price is lower, or, you know, there's incentives or whatever. And, you know, so that's generally the way we look at it. But fundamentally, regulatory impacts are always going to hit the energy space and climate. It's too big. It's too important. There's too much going on, too much money to be made to not have regulation be an important part of that. So, you know, we kind of just take what we can get and roll with the punches. Some good, some bad.
Absolutely, and regulatory, exactly. It has those beneficial and sometimes disadvantages to it, and just being hard to predict. I want to circle back to the point about sort of this inherent tension between, you know, the requirements for scale and speed versus working carefully and properly. How do we reconcile this? I'd love to direct this again to Michaela and Michael. You feel free to pick who goes first.
Yeah, I can start. I think it's definitely important to try to reconcile. You know, you don't want to just be throwing tech out there and kind of building this infrastructure in communities where you haven't spoken to key stakeholders. And at the same time, I think speed is so essential where we are currently. If we're going to come anywhere close to hitting our, you know, 2030, 2040 targets. So I think the number one most important kind of aspect is communicating, and also understanding that the communities you're working with, like, tech probably doesn't need to be deployed in the same way depending on where you're working. If you're installing, you know, solar panels somewhere in California versus somewhere in, you know, the middle of the country or on the East Coast, it's going to look very different. And also heat pumps are another example where the installation and kind of maintenance looks very different depending on geography. So I just think understanding the community you're working with and in is really important, and having that communication. But I think speed kind of can't be compromised in this case. But interested, Michael, to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I have the exact same tension of like wanting to scale like now or yesterday, but needing to do it in a way that is equitable and fair, and we're not creating the next problem by solving this problem. Trying to balance that with, this is an existential crisis, right? Like, we have to move faster. So I to be honest, I really struggle with it. I'm much more in the camp of, especially for tools that we know can work, you know, you need to your point, you need to be very thoughtful. You need to be customer centric, stakeholder centric, right? Like thinking about their needs and wants, but also, you know, solar we know works. Let's go put a ton of solar out there and really, you know, blanket our rooftops and do all this stuff, and try to remove as much red tape and issues with getting that stuff installed. I would say I lean more towards that, but it's tough, right? There's hard trade-offs that you need to make. And, you know, I just hope that we collectively just do it thoughtfully, but also with the speed that we need, that this crisis kind of demands of us. So it's not an easy thing, but we do need to move. We do need to move fast.
Yeah, thank you for being candid about that. It's definitely it's a tough thing to solve, but I think with, you know, with so many more people coming onto the space, I'm hoping we can find even better ways to scale, but being careful about it too. I want to switch a little bit and go into some individual actions. I know that we could talk about this, I feel, for a lot longer. But let's go just very briefly into Aarya. Can you tell me a little bit about if there is, you know, in all of this world of doom and gloom, where do you get, you know, your sense of inspiration from and your motivation? How do you stay positive?
I get a lot of energy from Climate Cardinals, the nonprofit that I work for. There I have, I think, 4 or 5 girls who I manage their projects every week, and I think the youngest one is 16 years old and she's in high school on the Ivory Coast. And she wants to be a lawyer at Columbia one day, and she's running for school president, and she is in all her IB classes. But then every Saturday morning, she logs on a Zoom call with me. It's actually evening for her, and she'll be at a cousin's birthday or something like that, or she'll be like at home, like coming back from a practice, and she'll just be on the Zoom call with me trying to talk about her next project and what she's done. And I wasn't like that at 16, honestly. I was so immersed in my AP classes, and I don't think I was caring about the world as much. So I would say it's her and people like her and the other people on my team and the other directors, that they're all mostly in high school and college, and they take time out of their day to do these projects that are related to climate education. So yeah, I would say it's like youth who really care about their planet, who are doing things like that. So yeah, that gives me a lot of great energy.
I love that. It only helps you put things into perspective, and really, really good to see, obviously, how excited people are to get involved and make a difference. I know that both Michaela and Michael, you were quite heavily involved in sports when you were at Stanford. Michaela, you were co-captain of the tennis, of the women's varsity tennis team. Are there aspects of this of the sportsmanship that come into play now in your career today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think tennis was definitely kind of one of the main parts of my Stanford education. I was kind of focused on classes and tennis, and had like a few other different obligations other than that, but very, very tennis heavy. And I think there are a lot of parallels to working on a team in a sports environment, and on a team if you're trying to reach, a goal to build a new climate technology, or at our firm, try to find the best and brightest, most kind of feasible technologies to invest in. And I think it's everything from kind of working together with people of all different perspectives, backgrounds, to reach a common goal. Also, as I already mentioned, kind of communication is so essential in both sports as well as any role you end up taking on after school. And I think also just kind of dedication, and regardless of if things are going well, if things aren't. I know, Michael, you mentioned kind of policy can kind of go either way depending on, every 4 years it can change a lot. So kind of understanding that broader goal, even in the face of challenges that might be outside of your control. And I think that's kind of carried over from sports for sure.
What about Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo a lot of that. I think that similarly, I had a similar experience, right? It was sort of school and wrestling, and that was kind of it for most of my Stanford experience. And I think that that's helped me in a lot of ways, similar like teamwork, being able to do stuff, but really it's just like doing things that are hard. And I think like that extends to even just going to Stanford, right? Like it's not easy to go there and do classes, and you're surrounded by all these smart people, and things are tough, and just being able to do those hard things. I think for me, wrestling really taught me how to persevere through that. It's always focused on there's a job to be done, and let's go do the job. And I think like I kind of take that mentality into my work and into sort of everything that I do. Separate from the wrestling, I would say that one thing that keeps me motivated is like, Aarya was mentioning the people, right? Like I just am excited. Like there's so many positive people, not just at Stanford. It's crazy how happy and excited and positive everyone is, but also in the climate space, there is a lot of doom and gloom, and it's like kind of bad, and we need to move faster. But there's also so much positivity. There's people that are dedicating their lives and their careers and what they care about to solving this problem, and like it's hard not to have that be infectious, and like really just be like, okay, if the person next to me is excited about this, I can be too. And I try to take a lot of that energy and kind of channel it towards doing something in the climate space.
I love that focus on people and just having the people around you being a source of inspiration, and taking what you learned at Stanford in sports too. This is actually a perfect segue for our next section. And we're definitely running a little bit on time, but let's just go rapid fire. What was your favorite class at Stanford and why? Let's start with Aarya.
I have to be honest, I can't say it was any of my ML coding classes. I would probably pick a fun one, and I would say my flute class. I was on the Stanford Flute Ensemble for every quarter. I've been playing since I was in middle school, and so yeah, rehearsals were every Sunday night, and it was nice to kind of get out of like the stress of school and exams and things like that, and just play my flute with 7 other women. So I would say that.
Music is so important.
I love that. And I can go next. I would say my favorite class was actually at the D School. It was a class called Inventing the Future, which ended up being kind of funny and how relevant it was to my full-time job. But basically stressed the idea that the best way to predict the future is to invent it. It offers a lot of kind of design thinking principles that go along with that. So it was a cool class to kind of think outside of the box and challenge existing perceptions.
Yeah, for me, I took a couple of classes in D school, loved all those, loved that, like that the way that you approach problems and you think about things has just been super valuable through my whole career. But for me, I would say it's any of the classes, understanding energy was obviously so fundamental. I also loved all of Gil Master's classes around energy efficiency and home building to, reduce carbon emissions and all that. And then I also took a demand side management, again, very technical, very much on the energy side of the fence. That was just a really great insight into how utilities can incentivize people in their actions based on pricing and different signals that they can send to their consumers. So it was really a really good grounding in how utilities can play a big part in electrification and decarbonization.
I love it. What about any favorite study or hangout spots on campus?
I can take that one.
Yeah,
It was pretty much Y2E2 in the wrestling room for me. As I said, didn't do much else beyond classes in wrestling, but really I spent a lot of time in Y2E2, and again, being around infectious, excited people and happy and motivated people really, changed, I'd say, my life, but also like really influenced that experience. So definitely those 2 places have a special place in my heart.
Aarya, what about you?
I would say the area around the GSB. Second year of my master's program, my friend and I accidentally got housing at the GSB, and we were the only people studying electrical engineering. Everyone else was a business major. And I think being around those kinds of people were probably the reason that I ended up in the startup world I am now. But also just the GSB, it's in the sunlight, and so when the weather was good, it was so nice to just sit outdoors and be around people who are talking to each other and having conversations, and that helped me focus more. Yeah, I'd say that area of campus.
Yeah, and for me, I would say probably Coho. I love kind of the cozy coffee shop vibes when I'm studying, and they also have, I don't know if they still have it, but they have live comedy once a week, at least when I was there, and also jazz performances. So it's kind of a cool atmosphere, but can definitely relate to Michael with the some days it was Coho and some days it was the floor of the locker room in the tennis facility. So just depended on the week.
Yeah, I think for me it was definitely Coupa by the library. I feel like a lot of humanities spent their time there, but never. The queue was or the line, as Americans say, was always so long to get in. But I think I'm gonna save the future outlook for towards the very end, but because I wanted to get to some questions from the Q&A. Very quickly, we got a question anonymously just on an idiot's guide to the IRA. Just a quick breakdown of potential funding for particular projects.
Yeah. So the IRA was a piece of legislation that was basically geared at really accelerating kind of action towards climate change through innovation. And there are a ton of different kind of sections to the IRA. So anything from, incentivizing domestic manufacturing with tax credits through to hydrogen and different kinds of clean energy development. Basically just offering a lot of incentives for kind of companies and communities to innovate in the climate sphere. And it will span on for the next decade, depending on, I think right now, administration is kind of trying to push out as much funding as it possibly can. But basically just trying to incentivize with tax credits and kind of spur on the next wave of clean tech innovation.
Great. Thank you, Michaela. Here's a question from Scott Lankford. He asks, as someone who designs climate change across the curriculum programs for undergrads elsewhere, I'm wondering if any specific classes at Stanford played a role in shaping your consciousness and inspiring careers around climate action versus the more informal peer interactions you've mentioned and/or the wider media and political and social environment. Any special classes or professors you'd like to shout out?
I have one. There was a class I took actually my freshman year at the GSB called Making Sense of Strategy, which is taught by Professor David Demarest, and basically gives you a ton of different case studies on leadership and kind of case studies where leaders are put in like challenging situations and really analyzes situations that went well and situations that didn't, and kind of tries to sift through and really hone in on the qualities that make great leaders. So I would say that definitely showed me that there are a lot of different ways to lead. And that was kind of my main takeaway that kind of shifted my mindset for that class.
Aarya, Michael, do you have any to add?
Yeah. Oh, good.
Okay, real quick, I don't have a specific teacher's name in mind, but I know that there's a seminar on climate change that's offered in the engineering school, and they bring in speakers every single week from all different schools and all different parts of the world and countries to talk about what they're doing, and spanning from like polar ice to greenhouses, things like that. And so the diversity of those topics were really helpful, and those made an impact on me. So I would say the climate seminar in the engineering school.
Yeah, and for me, I mentioned a couple already, but definitely the Understanding Energy class, which I now believe is available online for free through Stanford. And at the time, Jane Woodward and Carl Knapp were teaching that, and they were just incredible professors, distilling such complicated stuff down into things that really anyone can understand was incredible. And then Gil Masters and Noah Diffenbaugh, who are both in the civil and environmental engineering, or were at the time. They were just foundational to helping me understand and navigate Stanford, and also my journey to find what I was interested in.
Great. Then there's also a question from Don Maruska. Have any of you been looking at nature-based solutions to climate? I feel like maybe Michaela might be the one to answer there.
Yeah, we definitely are. So we've been looking a lot at, I guess, kind of two main sectors. So one is ocean-based carbon removal, and then one is soil. And I think both have kind of very different technologies that are foundational to how they're trying to remove carbon. But those are the two that we're really interested in.
And then I think this will wrap up nicely, actually, because this was one of the questions we didn't get around to. This is from Peter Goffin. What advice or resources would you recommend for young graduates, whether in or outside of climate? And I would sort of go beyond that and also extend if you have advice even for alumni who are further along in their career.
Yeah, I can offer just from the VC side of things. So I love this newsletter called Climate Tech VC for anyone who's interested in maybe getting into the investing side of things, and looking into kind of different news articles and keeping up with what's happening on the policy and the early stage tech side of things within climate.
Yeah, plus one to that. If you're even focused more on the product side and want to understand what cool things people are doing, yeah, that is just a wonderful newsletter. It's also very nice to see what VCs are funding, because that can then tend to help you understand what trends are in the market and where certain technologies might be going. So I think they do a deep dive. So it's like helpful to also understand industries. So yeah, +1 to the Climate Tech VC newsletter.
Aarya, do you have any advice?
I was going to say, pay attention to startups that are working in this space and what they're doing. I didn't know about that newsletter myself, so I will sign up after this. But a book I read that I really liked was called Project Drawdown, I believe. And that just talked about things from every single angle, from like composting to food waste and things like that. And yeah, that's also a little more on the consumer side.
I feel like we're coming up on time, but let's just do quick round of sort of future outlook. Do you have any predictions either for 2024, next 5 years? Let's go with Michael.
Yeah, for me, I just see what I call the continued domination of clean tech. It's just going to continue to suck up a ton of VC dollars. Hopefully, Michaela, I'm right on that one. And it's going to continue to scale. And really, it's putting these technologies that we've put into practice already, that are already at scale in some instances, and just really growing that, right? Going from 2% of total electricity generation for renewables to 10% to 25% to 100%. And I see that happening in the next, I hope 5 years. 5 years might be a little ambitious, but I think we'll definitely get there. And same thing in clean transportation. It's just gonna, I think EVs are gonna dominate most use cases. There's some that it doesn't work for. Hydrogen might be able to fill that gap. Ammonia might be able to fill that gap. I'm not sure on those smaller use cases, but for the vast majority of it, it's going to be EV all day. So.
Yeah, and I can add to that. I think something that's been interesting from the VC side is that you've seen all of these hype cycles with kind of other technologies, whether it was crypto like a year and a half ago to now AI, which I think will also stick around. Climate's stayed very high in terms of the graph of different tech that's being funded. So I think that's been really encouraging, and it's pretty simple because we have to fund it. We don't have another choice. It's the planet. So I definitely think we're gonna see that trend continue. Something else kind of bringing things closer to home at Stanford is that, so I did my master's degree at what's now the Dover School. And 5 years ago, I want to say there were maybe 5 to 10 people in that master's degree, and now there are over 100 in a graduating class. So I think just the influx of talent kind of coming into the space, and my hope, I don't know if it's a prediction, but kind of aspirational, is that the number of students you see majoring in computer science, it's going to be kind of a similar trend going into climate tech in the next 5 years. And I think things are definitely trending at least close to that.
For me, I can speak to the fashion side. I think a huge light is being shined on the invisible mass consumption that we have. I think there's an eruption of fashion tech startups that are trying to solve problems in that space. As of pretty recently, garment tracking is a thing. So now they can actually, they've made technology to track the life cycle of your garment. And I think that's incredible. So yeah, there's so much more renting and sharing. And I think sustainability is now at the forefront of more people's minds when it comes to their individual choices. And that definitely relates to fashion, but of course that extends to all parts of their life. So that's what I'm really optimistic for too.
Yeah, I think we have a lot to be excited about in the coming years ahead, and I think it's been such a pleasure talking with all of you today. I want to thank each of our panelists, now that we're wrapping up, for your insight and for sharing examples of how diverse climate action can be. We got a very positive comment in the chat from Scott. So thank you for that. And yeah, I just hope that those watching have gained some useful takeaways and are feeling more optimistic about the road ahead. I can say for myself that we've touched on some really important topics involving scale, the importance of friends for inspiration, and the circular pathways that your career can sometimes take. It doesn't always make sense at the time. And the increasing number of students in the Door School definitely gives me, and I think all of us, a lot to be hopeful for. Yeah, and I just think that you are all genuinely making your mark, and I'm really excited to follow along with each of you and see what you end up doing next. And thank you to those who submitted the thought-provoking questions, and all of you for attending. It was really fun to have to host this event. This is my first live event, so it was fun to take on that challenge, and it was very, very much worth it. So thank you again for such a stimulating conversation, and please stay tuned for more upcoming events from Saga and SAS, or that's Stanford Alumni and Sustainability. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Saga. It's 2 a.m. in Iceland, I think. You put so much work into putting this together. Thank you for making this happen in the first place.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.